hate people that believe in Allah and Muhammad and Buddha and Confucius and all these other religions I had to study in seminary. I don't hate those people. I know that they're all created by God, and that the only way they're going to see my God is if I love them enough to show my God to them. Does that make sense? You're not going to hate anybody into the kingdom. Homosexuals? Drug addicts? You think you're going to hate them into the kingdom? So many families can't even invite them to their dinner table. Your own sons and daughters. Cousins. Yes, it's a sin, but it's also a sin to stop loving them. We can't stop loving, because when we stop loving anybody, whether it's because of their sin or whatever, we stop showing God. It's difficult to live the way the Bible is trying to tell us to live. It's hard. The Bible says, judge as ye shall be judged. All of these people that we reject and that we judge, whether it's for religious purposes, sexual preference, drinking, smoking, whatever it is that we reject them for, is the opposite of what God calls us to. No matter how many times you hear it, reject the sin and love the sinner. No matter how many times you hear that, it's just as hard every time I hear it. Because I'm uncomfortable around certain things, certain people. But deep down within every one of those people is a created soul by God. Deep down within every animal. I shared with you, I just saw Lester sitting there, and I shared with you when we took my horse out there, and my vet he came all the way out there to put it to sleep. I never realized until that point, when I had my horse's head and he was put down, she was put down, there was a soul in there. Why is it that looking into the eyes of most people, until they die, we really don't see that soul? The absence of that soul, and many a time, has been what made me see the spirit and the soul of that person. Why do we wait till it's too late? There needs to be a nurturing of God within us so that we can nurture others to love in the way that God intends him to. You know what? You don't need to take the burden of other people's sin upon yourself. There was only one person that did that, and that was Jesus Christ. He took the burden. It was him. And then he told us to go and love, make disciples of all nations, all people. But yet we conveniently make a list of who we're going to be willing to accept into our club. That's not right. Don't condone the sin and accept the sin, but for goodness sakes, don't reject the soul that God has created. I'm thankful that there were people that didn't reject me. I wouldn't be here today if it weren't for, and this is terrible, but I might have shared this before, but what I thought to be the old Methodist women, I would walk to church by myself at 7 years old. And looking back on it, those women were only 40 years old. But I was 7. I was 7. I thought, these old ladies, what's the matter? But when I came in the back door, they would be looking for me. They would stand up and hug me, something I didn't get at home. And they would ask me to sit with them. Wow. And a lot of them knew what a little terror I was. But they loved me. One of those women is really instrumental in why I cook like I do. My mom had to work all the time. So every year at Christmas time, from the time I was like 4 years old, the next door neighbor lady, which was one of the Methodist women at that church that I thought was old, she'd have me over every Christmas well, I was there at her house almost every day, but we would bake cookies from the time I was real little. Wow, funny I remember those things. It's not so much her talking to me about Jesus that I remember. What I remember is how she showed me love in the world. How they were willing to hug me. Looking back on it, I wasn't dressed too good. Probably didn't smell real great. But they hugged me and loved me. Are we willing to hug and embrace and love whoever and whatever comes to us? Remember that they could be angels unaware. They could be sent by God to you to test whether or not you truly have His love within you. That's where we need to remember, through whom God made everything and through whom we have been given life. Through whom we have been given life. However, not all Christians realize this. Wow, that's an understatement, isn't it? Not all Christians realize this. Some are accustomed to thinking of idols as being real. So when they eat food that has been offered to idols, they think of it as the worship of their real God. And their weak consciences are violated. It's true that we can't win God's approval by what we eat. We don't miss out on anything if we don't eat it. And we don't gain anything if we do. Well, some of us do. But I don't think it's referring to the waistline. There's no spiritual feeling in any type of food except communion. But you must be careful with the freedom of yours. Do not cause, now this is what you got to hear. Do not cause a brother or sister with a weaker conscience to stumble. Friends, the drug addict is the weaker conscience. The sinner that you avoid and stay away from. When it says weaker conscience, we need to remember that there by the grace of God go I am a sinner saved by grace. Only the grace of God cleanses and makes me righteous. I need to remember that because the journey that they are on, I was on at one time. But by God's grace, I was able to turn it around. Where are they going to find God's grace if we are not willing to help them not stumble? You see, this is what can happen. We Christians who think it is wrong to eat this food will see you eating in the temple of an idol. You know, there's nothing wrong with it, but they will be encouraged to violate their conscience by eating food that has been dedicated to the idol. So because of your superior knowledge, a weak Christian for whom Christ died will be destroyed. Do you hear that? Christ died for sinners. He didn't die for people that weren't sinners. He was the only one that wasn't a sinner. He died for sinners. The very people that we have a hard time dealing with. And you are sinning against Christ when you sin against other Christians by encouraging them to do something they believe is wrong.